Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 40, Brown versus Silva. It's been a while since my last prediction video. I think my last one was UFC 170, Hendricks Lawler fight. I've been away from doing these videos for a bit. I've still watched all those events in between, of course, but just got a little too busy. Couldn't quite keep up with these videos, but I'm back at it. It's almost summertime. I hope my loyal viewers and subscribers, those of you who were watching my videos before, I hope you'll still be here. But I plan to do a prediction and recap video for every event, at least during the summer, starting with the next event, UFC 173, and probably all the way till the end of August. There's a lot of shows, but expect me to be here doing predictions and recap videos. I probably won't do a recap video for this event, but 173 to the end of the summer, predictions and recap videos. Alright, let's get to this card. Starting off with the prelim card on UFC Fight Pass at welterweight, Anthony Lapsley versus Albert Tumanov. Tumanov dropped his last fight against Ildemar Alcantara, and Lapsley lost to Jason High in his last fight. Both guys were out-wrestled. Lapsley out-grappled by Jason High. I believe he had some success really early on in that fight before High just took over with the grappling. Can't quite remember, but he did get pretty thoroughly dominated on the ground by High, and Tumanov couldn't stop Alcantara's takedown in his last fight. I'm going to go with Lapsley. I think, both guys were dominated. I think Lapsley just seemed a little more capable of fighting guys at the UFC level than Tumanov did in his last fight. I also think Jason High is, a better measuring stick than a guy like Ildemar Alcantara. So I'm going to take Lapsley by decision, but don't really feel confident in that pick in either guy here. Next up at lightweight, Justin Salis taking on Ben Wall. Justin Salis, I've never really been impressed with this guy. I think his skill set is pretty limited, but he has picked up some decent wins. Has 2 wins in the UFC over Anton Kavenin and Aaron Riley, and losses to Tim Means and Thiago Tavares, getting finished in both of those fights. Seems to fight, circling around on the outside and throwing short punches, stick and move kind of stuff, and not much else. And Ben Wall got knocked out in his last fight against Alex Garcia, and made a very impressionable entrance with the animal mask, the big animal head thing, in Australia. But this guy's a vet of tough smashes, and didn't impress me at all in the show. Didn't impress me getting knocked out by Garcia. And I remember that fight, Garcia threw the uppercut about 3 times and landed it, and Ben Wall did nothing to protect that or to adjust. Ended up getting knocked out. Definitely taking Salis here. I think he can win a decision. He has a lot more experience in the UFC. Obviously, Ben Wall only has 1 fight, and Salis has 4. I'm taking Salis by decision. Next up at featherweight, Manville the Anvil Gamburian taking on Nick the Carney Lentz. I feel pretty confident taking Lentz here. Since dropping down to featherweight, the guy seems like he's been able to take his game to another level, finishing E.G. Mitsuoka, whatever happened to that guy, and then decision wins over Diego Nunez and Hakran Diaz, and then dropped his last fight to Chad Mendes, which there's really no shame in that. Did take Mendes to decision. The thing with Lentz, very good wrestler, very persistent, dog tough guy, but when he's on the feet, he's in trouble. Both the Nunez and the Diaz fights look very similar. He does this thing where he can get the guys down, out wrestle them for 2 rounds, and then that third round seems to be in trouble on the feet, lets the guys come back, and especially that Nunez fight, I remember very clearly, anytime Nunez started to open up on the feet, Lentz had no answer, and he had to really pursue the takedown. But even before Lentz dropped to featherweight, I thought he was a pretty talented guy at lightweight. He did drop a few fights to Bocek and Dunham. Had a tough fight with Oliveira, but Gamburian, I can't get behind this guy. Lost his last fight to Dennis Seaver, although that fight was overturned. Before that, had 2 wins over Cole Miller and Omagawa, but the Cole Miller win just really bullshit. That was the fight where Miller elbowed him in the head right at the end of the first round, I believe, and Gamburian just stopped, and the ref gave him like 2 minutes to recover. So I don't, I can't credit him too much for that win. And before that, he was on a 3-fight losing streak to Aldo, Griffin, and Nunez. But Gamburian just doesn't seem to be able to finish people the way he did when he finished Mike Brown. Lentz, I just think, he's been more effective with his wrestling. He's finished guys of late. Well, he's finished one guy, but if it comes down to the wrestling, I think Lentz's wrestling will beat Gamburian's judo, and on the feet, I'll give Gamburian the edge, but I think Lentz is just going to be more persistent. I think his wrestling will win out. Now on to the Fox Sports 2 prelim card. At bantamweight, Eddie Weinland taking on Johnny Eduardo. This is a squash match. Weinland should just roll right over Eduardo in the first round. Eduardo, this guy, he's only had 2 fights in about 3 years in the UFC. Came in at UFC 134 in his debut, dropped a decision to Rafael Assunção, and then in 2012 he had a win over Jeff Curran. I remember that fight, and it was very unimpressive. He basically leg kicked his way to a victory over a guy who had no striking. And Weinland, obviously, contender, got knocked out by Barao and fought for the title. Won his last fight over Yves Jabouin. He went for an arm triangle choke in that fight, I remember, and so that was a new little wrinkle in his game. But Eddie Weinland really turned the corner in his career, I thought, after he lost to Faber and Benavidez. Getting a knockout on Jorgensen, was really the first guy to ever handle Jorgensen that way, and then I thought had a very good fight against Pickett where he was able to use his length, use his jab to keep Pickett outside the whole time. So I think Weinland, while a bit one-dimensional, seems to only be able to really use his striking, doesn't mix in the wrestling too much. I think he's a guy who could get back to the top, and very dangerous guy, very lethal with his hands, and Eduardo. I mean, come on, what? How can how can you justify giving him this fight? Let alone picking him. Weinland should just KO him in the first round. I think that's. I'm going with Weinland first round KO. Next up at welterweight, Jan Cabral taking on Zach Cummings. These guys are tough vets. Jan Cabral from Tough Brazil 2 last year, and he won. I believe he won his first fight in the house, and then broke his hand, had to be sent home. He seemed like a pretty decent grappler, a pretty scrappy guy on the ground. Nothing too spectacular. I don't remember much of his game on the feet, if he showed it at all. And Zach Cummings, tough 17 vet. He lost to, I believe he lost to Dylan Andrews on the show. I think he got, I can't remember if he got submitted or knocked out. But then won his last fight in the UFC against Ben Alloway by Darce choke. I don't think that really means too much. Ben Alloway was another tough vet. I want to side with Cabral here. I think being the Brazilian, probably having the better jiu-jitsu game, I think he'll be able to control Cummings on the ground, and I think both guys want to fight this on the ground. Cummings, I think, will have the size advantage, coming down, a former middleweight fighter. He'll probably have the striking advantage as well, but if it's on the ground, I think Cabral is going to be a little too scrappy, a little too good with the positioning on the ground. I'm going to take Cabral by decision. Next up at flyweight, Kyoji Horiguchi versus Daryl Montague. Horiguchi really impressed me in his last fight, knocking out Dustin Peg. Seemed to have a really unorthodox style of striking. He would throw hooks from his waist, hopping in. It was really something special to watch. And Dustin Peg, hadn't been knocked out before that in the UFC, and he had fought several guys. He had fought a really talented striker, Yves Jabouin, but Horiguchi just put him out early. And Daryl Montague, on the other hand, I haven't followed his career at all outside the UFC. I know he was highly touted coming in to his last fight against John Dodson, and John Dodson just smoked him, knocked him out early in the first round. So I'm going to go with Horiguchi here. I feel like that's not a popular pick, but Montague looked slow against Dodson, and anyone will look slow against Dodson, but Horiguchi, I think, will have that same kind of leaping in with powerful, quick shots style like Dodson did, and I think he'll be able to get the KO at some point. So I'm taking Horiguchi by knockout. Next up at middleweight, Ed Shortfuse Herman versus Rafael Sapo Natal. Ed Herman, I was really high on this guy when he came back, made his return a few years ago. I was on a 3-fight win streak. Beat Tim Crater, knocked him out, had a real nice heel hook on Kyle Noak, showed a very good guard in that fight, and then a submission win over Clifford Starks. And I don't think he's been the same since then. Dropped a fight to Jake Shields, got submitted by Jacare, had a real tough razor-thin decision win against Trevor Smith. That was a real brawl, and then lost his last fight against Talis Latis. He did lose the top guys, Jacare and Shields, but I don't think he's looked the same since, that 3-fight win streak he was on. And his opponent, Rafael Sapo Natal, this guy, he's done a good job of racking up wins. He did get knocked out by Tim Kennedy in his last fight. Didn't look too impressive, but his wins over Tor, Trowan, and Sean Spencer, where he was able to get the finish. He also has a win over João Zeffarino, but that was a very unimpressive performance. He's looked good. He's talented on the feet. I remember him. He looked pretty good against Craig. Looked like he was putting a beating on him before getting caught with the head kick. He also has wins over Michael Kuiper and Paul Bradley. And I remember him getting those wins on the feet. On the ground, he's a real slick guy. He's one of these guys whose jiu-jitsu transitions very well to MMA. He gets a lot of reversals. I remember the Tortrowan fight. He got one reversal. Sweeps are very good, really tricky on the ground, although he wasn't able to put away Trowan or João Zeffarino, which are two lower level guys, and that might call into question how effective his sub game is, although I think he's very good positionally. And Ed Herman, on the other hand, I mentioned in that Kyle Noak fight, I think he showed a very good guard, but since then, out-grappled by Talis Leitis in his last fight, subbed easily by Jacare, and out-grappled by Jake Shields. On the ground, I think Natal is going to have a pretty distinct advantage with the positional grappling. On the feet, I give Herman the power advantage, but I think Natal will be quicker, and I think he'll be able to put combinations together a little better. So I'm taking Natal here. I don't think he subs Herman. Herman's pretty tough, but I do think he's going to get the win and really be in control on the feet and on the ground in this fight. Moving on to the Fox Sports 1 main card, which is a pretty fun main card, I think, for a Fox Sports 1 event. Kind of stacked if you enjoy, some of the up-and-coming prospects and some of the lower to mid-level guys. But the first fight at flyweight, Chris Cariaso versus Louis Smoka. Smoka, I thought, just looked great in his last fight. He's one of the Hawaiian fighters who seem to have taken the UFC by storm this past year. But he looked great against Oskilic. His striking looked great. Real long jabs, long crosses, and Oskilic, a good wrestler, took Smoka down several times, but as he took him down before they hit the mat, Smoka was able to reverse him, had several of those, and just looked very good. Chris Cariaso, on the other hand, in his last fight against Danny Martinez, did not look that good. I believe most of that fight took place against the fence with Cariaso controlling him in the clinch. Before that, he was able to get a TKO over Iliarde Santos, but Cariaso was pretty close to getting finished himself in that fight early on. Was able to turn it around and knock out Santos. Before that, he had losses to Jussier Formiga, where he was badly out-wrestled, out-grappled, and submitted by John Moraga before that. And he's been in the UFC a long time, since 2011. He was on a 3-fight win streak at one point. He had wins over Von Lee. He had a win over Takeya Mitsugaki, which everyone thought was a robbery, and a win over Josh Ferguson. It was a tough vet. Never been too impressive. Kind of a scrappy guy. Fair grappling. Decent kickboxer. Only that one finish against Iliarde Santos in his whole UFC career. But Smoka, on the other hand, as I said, I think he just looked great. A real young guy. Seems to just have great potential. I think he's gonna be better than Cariaso here. I think on the feet I think it'll be competitive. But Smoka, I think, is just, I got to go with the young up-and-comer here. Cariaso, I think he's kind of leveled off. I don't think he's really getting too much better. Next up at heavyweight, Pele versus Ruin Potts. I don't know anything about Ruin Potts, and Pele, on the other hand, I thought he looked terrible against Nikita Krylov. Both guys gassed terribly in that fight, but Pele was able to get the knockout in the third round. But then against Pat Barry, comes out, looks like a completely different guy. Takes Barry down right at the beginning of the fight and is able to just Donkey Kong punch his way to a knockout win over Pat Barry. You can say what you want about Pat Barry and his chin and his takedown defense, but I thought Pele was just going to get ran over in that fight. And he shut me up. He looked very good, I thought. So I'm going to go with Pele here. I say he wins by knockout, but again, don't know anything about Ruin Potts. Let me know if this is a guy I'm underestimating, if we should be paying attention to him, but I'm taking Pele by early knockout. Next up at welterweight, Neil Magny taking on Tim the Dirty Bird Means, and I'm very happy that Tim Means is back in the UFC. He was released last summer after his loss to... I thought he was released. He was released after his loss to Danny Castillo last summer. And outside of the UFC, since his release, he has wins over Pete Spratt, finished him in the first round, KO, and then TKO'd Artenis Young. But this guy I thought looked really good in the UFC. Ran over Justin Salis, who's also fighting on this card. Had a win over Bernardo Magalhães in his UFC debut, where he showed real good knees from the tie clinch, I remember. A tall guy for welterweight. Against Masvidal, he was competitive. I actually thought that fight could have gone his way. He was on his back in that Masvidal fight and was doing a lot of damage with elbows from his back. And against Castillo, he was winning on the feet, but just couldn't stop the takedown. And I think Castillo is a lot better fighter than people give him credit for. So, I didn't really see, I didn't think, he really deserved to be cut. But I think he's a talented guy, real scrappy. When he's dangerous when he's on his back and dangerous on the feet. I am taking Tim Means in this fight, but Neil Magny, tough 16 vet, got to the semifinals in the house where he was brutally KO'd by Mike Ricci, where I actually thought, that's where a lot of the hype, at least for me, for Mike Ricci came from. Just smashed Neil Magny, but since coming in the UFC, hasn't done all that well. He's gone 2-2. Had a win over fellow tough 16 vet John Manley. Then got submitted by Sergio Moraes and dropped a decision to Seth Baczynski. And won his last fight against Ghassan Umalatov. But Neil Magny's a real rangy striker. Against John Manley, he showed a solid ground game. Good control on top. But on the feet, he's a real stick and move kind of guy. He's very long, likes to keep guys at the end of his jab. A real technical, precise striker. Hasn't shown a lot of finishing power on his feet, though. But I'm going with Means. I think he's going to be able to make it dirty, get inside, be in Magny's face, put him on his heels. And Magny, I think, will definitely be more technical, and I think he'll have the wrestling advantage as well. But I got to go with Means. I'm really rooting for him here. I like the guy's style. Next up at lightweight, Eric Kook versus Darren, the Detroit superstar Kookshank. I'm going to go with Kook here. Kookshank has been one of these guys. He's looked great against low-level competition. And he's a tough 15 vet. Got knocked out by James Vick in the house, but did pretty well coming in the UFC after that. Had a decision win over Chris Tickle, where he used his wrestling, and then after that became a karate striking machine, KOing Henry Martinez with a head kick and a very impressive win. Dropped a decision to John Makdessi, where he was outstruck, couldn't control the distance. Then won a decision over Yves Edwards, got really dominated and kind of just ran through by Adriano Martins, got submitted, and then won his last fight by Mike Rio, where Mike Rio is basically a punching doll for Kookshank. Won by wheel kick, KO. So Kookshank, very talented on the feet, does a lot of unorthodox karate stuff, a lot of spinning attacks, spinning kicks. But when he faces tougher competition, he hasn't really risen to the occasion. Against Makdessi, he got a little too wild with all of his spinning attacks and couldn't really keep Makdessi away from him. Makdessi was able to get inside a lot, close the distance. And same thing with Martins, who's a lot bigger than Kookshank. He wasn't able to use his striking effectively to keep Martins on the outside, and Martins actually knocked him down twice, I believe, in that fight with a step and jab. So I think that's Kookshank's weakness, is managing distance. Kook, on the other hand, this guy just smashed Rafael Oliveira in his last fight. Looked very good, very violent, but Rafael Oliveira wasn't much of a test for him, I think. His fight before that had a real competitive back and forth fight with Poirier. Nearly one of those fights where he nearly finished Poirier in the first round while also almost nearly getting finished himself. Before that, got TKO'd pretty brutally by Ricardo Lamas really quickly in that fight. Well, that was in the second round, but he did get finished pretty bad in that fight. And then before that, had a win over Jonathan Brookins, where I didn't think he looked good and actually scored that fight for Brookins. Had some really good wins in the WEC. KO'd Francisco Rivera, and then in his UFC debut, he KO'd Rafael Sunsao, which is really impressive in hindsight, seeing how well Sunsao's doing now. But Kook, I think, is big power. I think the move back to welterweight, back to lightweight, I think that's going to do him very well. And I think he's going to be bigger than Kookshank, and I think we're going to see a similar fight. I think it's going to play out similarly to Kookshank's fight with Martins. Kook just being the bigger guy coming forward. I don't think Kookshank will be able to keep Kook on the outside away from him. And I think Kook will be able to knock out Kookshank at some point. So I'm taking Kook by finish. I also think he'll be able to get Kookshank on the ground if he wants to and use that brutal ground and pound we saw in his last fight. Next up, a middleweight co-main event. Costas Philippou taking on Lorenz Larkin. Philippou just hasn't been the same to me after his loss to Francis Carmont. I think it started before that with his win over Tim Boetsch, where he headbutted and eye poked Tim Boetsch before TKOing him. Before that, he was on a good win streak, which I think, looking back, he was a little bit overrated. Didn't really fight, anyone too good. I think his best win in that stretch was over Court McGee, but the other guys he beat, Jorge Rivera, KO Jared Hammond, which, Hammond was coming off of a win over Dalloway at that point, but now it's just like, it's Jared Hammond. And then Ricky Fukuda decisioned him after his win over Corn McGee. Again, who cares really? And then that fight against Francis Carmont just couldn't stop the takedown and really had nothing off of his back. And then against Rockhold in his last fight just got smashed, kick to the body. But Rockhold is a great fighter and a contender at middleweight, so kind of hard to gauge where Philippu's at. But I don't know. This fight will definitely. This is the style he wants, I would think. Being a boxer, likes to throw hands, but Larkin in his last fight lost to Brad Tavares, and I thought that fight was actually pretty close. I think I gave Larkin at least one round in there, but lost that fight. Before that, he had a nice win over Chris Camozzi. Had a win over Robbie Lawler in Strikeforce. And his debut in the UFC, lost to Francis Carmont. And again, I thought he won that fight. Most of that fight took place on the feet. I remember him just outpointing Carmont on the feet and stuffing a lot of the takedowns. But I'm going to go with Larkin here. The only thing holding Larkin back, I think, is really his own style. Against Camozzi, you see this guy he does a lot of bobbing up and down on his feet, and he'll come in with these real powerful strikes, and he really busted up Camozzi's face in their fight. He's good at defending the takedown, but he just doesn't put together combinations and doesn't come forward enough. He really likes to pick his shots, likes to land one big shot, get out of range and reset. I think he's really got to come forward and start putting combinations together. However, Philippu, I think if this fight's contested on the feet, I think Larkin's gonna have the better movement. I think he'll be able to control distance better. Philippu just likes to come in, and the fights that he's won with his striking really haven't been against guys who could challenge him on the feet, and Larkin, I think, is just too athletic and too good with his movement on the feet to just stand in front of Philippu. So I'm taking Larkin here. I'd hope he can break out of that very methodical pace that he fights at, and try to put Philippu away. But I'm gonna take Larkin by decision here. Now with the main event at welterweight, Matthew Mortal Brown fighting Eric Silva. I've got a lot to say on this fight. So this might take a while. A lot of people feel that Matt Brown deserves a better opponent than Eric Silva. I agree. Matt Brown's been on a great win streak. Really turned his career around after that 3-fight losing streak, where he got submitted in every single one of those fights. Had a win over John Howard, then got submitted again by Seth Baczynski, and since then really turned things around. Knocked out Chris Cope, decision Stephen Thompson, TKO'd Luis Ramos, KO'd Mike Swick, TKO'd Jordan Mean, and KO'd Mike Pyle in his last fight. Now, what's important to note here is that Matt Brown, I think, has progressively been getting better. He's gotten better in each of those fights in this current win streak he's on. And I also think, though, that he's gotten better in each of those fights, and he's also, each guy he's fought has been, better than the last. Well, not Luis Ramos, he's not better than Stephen Thompson, and not Mike Swick, but from Chris Cope to Stephen Thompson, and then from Ramos to Swick to Mean to Pyle, I think all of those guys, the next one's been better than the previous, and at the same time, Brown has gotten better, more dominant with his game in each of those fights. But at the same time, you know, Matt Brown does not have a win over a top 10 guy. Maybe not even top, maybe top 15 with Pyle in his last fight. But other than that, you know, doesn't have a win over a top 10 guy. So to say that, you know, Silva doesn't deserve this fight, I don't completely agree. Silva doesn't have a top 10 win either. But he does have wins over Jason High, Charlie Brenneman. In his last fight, fought a nobody, Takanori Sato. But he also has a win over Luis Ramos, which, you know, I might add, he ran through him a lot more easily than Brown did. But, what am I saying here? You know, Eric Silva is a very dangerous guy, and even though he lost against Fitch and got KO'd by Dong Hyun Kim, that doesn't take away, you know, the skills that he's shown in there. He's super quick. When he hurts guys, he jumps on them, finishes them off very quickly, can defend the takedown, show that against Brenneman, has a submission game, show that against, again, Brenneman and also Jason High. Very athletic on the feet, very fast, very quick. And Matt Brown, as good of a knockout artist as he's become, I can find, you know, holes with, you know, with the guys he's beaten. Mike Pyle, and people are saying, you know, Mike Pyle is a better guy than Eric Silva. I don't quite agree. Obviously, he has a lot more wins at welterweight, but Mike Pyle also, you know, never really had a top 10 win at welterweight. But Pyle, I think his chin is very suspect, and yeah, I think his chin is very suspect. I think Silva would have, you know, just as easy a time knocking him out as Brown did. Jordan Mean fight. Jordan Mean hurt Brown badly with a punch to the body, put him down, nearly finished Brown, and Brown did very well. Actually was able to lock up a triangle after getting dropped. But he did get hurt, did show that opening in his striking defense. Swick, I would argue, you know, coming off of a long layoff, and even before that layoff against Paulo Thiago, showed that his chin, you know, wasn't quite there. Luis Ramos, you know, low-level fighter as far as we can tell from his 2 fights in the UFC. Stephen Thompson was able to hurt Matt Brown as well, wobbled him on the feet. Brown did very well to, you know, hang in there and make it a real dogfight and, you know, endure. And then Chris Cope, that knockout, you know, Chris Cope, just a tough vet, couldn't hang in the UFC. So what I'm saying is, while Matt Brown's been on a very impressive win streak and does have, you know, really big KO wins over decent guys, you know, the guys he's beaten, they have their own problems, and, you know, when you look at it, the guys he's beaten are not that high level in the UFC. You know, Eric Silva, who I already talked about a bit. It's 2 losses to John Fitch and Dong Hyun Kim. Dong Hyun Kim, you know, he was able to take Silva's best punches and land that big KO punch. Different striking style than Brown. John Fitch really out-grappled, out-wrestled Eric Silva. Matt Brown, if he wins this fight, I think it's going to be in the later rounds. I think it's very good for him that this is a 5-round fight. If it goes past the 3rd round especially, I think Matt Brown's just going to eat Silva up. He's got that, that real toughness factor. Was able to endure against Mean after being hurt, and also against Stephen Thompson after being hurt. But again, he was hurt by both those guys on the feet in their fights. And Eric Silva, he can connect early. He jumps on guys early. Did it to Luis Ramos, Carlo Prater, Brenneman not so much. He was able to get him with the wrestling. And Dong Kyun Kim, Silva did try to put him away early and did, had Kim in some bad spots throughout that fight. But Kim was able to endure and knock Silva out. But I don't think it's, out of the question to think that Silva could knock out Matt Brown early in this fight. And I definitely give him the advantage early. But Matt Brown, I do think he's a little tougher than Silva. If he gets hurt, he does have the ability to come back. And I think that'll help him, especially in those later rounds, as I said. Now, I think one aspect that people are not considering is the ground game. Silva showed in that Jason High fight, he can get submissions from, unorthodox positions, sub Brenneman too. And that's been Matt Brown's weakness throughout his career, is the submission game. I think he's been, improving against Mike Swick. Had locked up a Darce choke at one point, and then against Jordan Meehan, he almost finished him with a triangle choke off his back after getting dropped with a body shot, and was really hurting after that. So that would be interesting. Brown's defensive jiu-jitsu against Silva's top game. Silva far more athletic than Brown, I think. And I think it's really going to be Matt Brown early in trying to weather that early storm. If he can do that, I think he can get the upper hand later in the fight. My initial thought when this fight was announced, I thought Silva, I gave him a pretty distinct advantage. Thinking about it afterwards, I leaned more towards Brown. I was actually pretty convinced that Brown was just too tough and too good with the hands. But my final prediction, I think Brown's striking game, he really just likes to come forward. There's not much setup. It's not technical at all. We saw that against Swick and Pyle. He just kind of bum rushes guys. Not straight out of the gate, but that's how he comes forward. Whereas Eric Silva, he times his stuff a lot more carefully and a lot faster than Brown, and has a lot more striking tools with the knees and everything else to put guys away. So real close fight to call. I do think I'm going to side with Silva, but Matt Brown's so tough, I could definitely see him winning. But I think early on, Silva has better advantage. I just think overall he's got more tools to work with, and a little more lethal on the feet, and also on the ground. I think he's going to have an advantage there. So I'm taking Eric Silva. I'm going to take Silva to finish Brown early. Not a popular pick. I do agree Silva's a bit overrated. I was really high on this guy since his first fight in the UFC, knocking out Luis Ramos. But, he's definitely had some setbacks, but I still think he's very, very talented. And if he can get, shore up those holes in his game, I think he can, still has the potential to be a contender. So I'm taking Eric Silva here. I'm taking Eric Silva by TKO, first or second round. Alright guys, well, those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 40, Brown versus Silva. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, comment, subscribe. And I'll be back with my predictions for UFC 173, Barao versus Dillashaw next time. Alright, guys. Take care. See ya.